Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the WellMed Charitable Foundation Caregiver Teleconnection. Our series of emotions, we're in part 2 today, is How to Deal with Anger by Lucy Barylak, MSW, and Elliot Montgomery Sklar, PhD. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about them. Elliot is a public health professional focused upon supporting the health of the public through academic work, research, and service. He has led healthy aging programs for seniors and for caregivers in Canada, Florida, and on the web. Dr. Sklar is an associate professor of healthcare sciences at Nova Southeastern University in Florida. He publishes and presents his work internationally, which is focused on the complexity of issues related to aging and caregiving. Our dear Lucy Barylak, has a master's degree in social work from McGill University. She is presently working as a consultant for a health network in Montreal, Canada. She's been involved in various research projects, published numerous articles related to caregiving issues, lectured at several universities and colleges on innovative approaches to caregiving, and she presents annually at international and national conferences. Lucy's also a consultant for private industry in the US, including her work at the WellMed Charitable Foundation and their clinics in Texas. In addition, Lucy would like you to know that she was a caregiver for her mother for about 10 years. And with that, Lucy, Elliot, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I just wanted to begin by mentioning to everyone that as part of this unique series, we have a unique after program where Lucy and I will be staying on for an extra 30 minutes. We will not be recording the program. We will also share with you at that time how to change your name here in Zoom so that you can remain anonymous. But it's for those who would like to stay on and discuss issues related to anger and resentment, perhaps some experiences, or to ask some questions.
Thank you, Elliot. Welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to talk about how to deal with anger. You know, anger is part of everyone's emotional compass, helping us navigate life. Anger signals that we are being threatened, injured, deprived, maybe disrespected. We must stand up and take care of ourselves and those we love. The experience of caregiving puts us all to the test. We find ourselves immersed in a pool of emotions, from fear, sadness, and yes, anger. Anger should be one of our adaptive tools to deal with the most difficult circumstances. Sometimes it becomes an obstacle to our struggles, especially when it derails into aggression and even violence. But far more often, it energizes and motivates us to fix what is broken.
That's very true. And I think also it's important that we address the fact that anger is an emotion that, as you said earlier, almost all caregivers can identify with at times. How can you not feel angry if someone in your life has their health in a position that is declining? How can you not feel angry when your own life becomes upended because of your caregiving responsibilities? How can you not feel anger when all of the caregiving responsibilities might be falling on your shoulders alone, or you perceive it to be that way? These are things that we hear all the time, but there's a very important distinction I think we need to make for our conversation today between anger and resentment, which are different. Feelings of anger and resentment sometimes happen together, and they're similar, but they are two different things. So first, anger. Anger is defined as a strong feeling of annoyance, displeasure, or hostility. And it's often a split-second reaction that can occur to an irritating or frustrating event or situation, like getting cut off in traffic, for example. Resentment, on the other hand, is much more complex. It occurs over time, and it incorporates many emotions like sadness, anger, fear. And instead of being a reaction to a single event, it can be a culmination where you feel like this is the straw that's breaking the camel's back, so to speak. And that can be difficult to remain in the present when you feel that way. Now, as a caregiver, it's very easy to fluctuate between these two emotions. For example, you might feel angry if a loved one stubs your toe with a walker or a cane. But at the same time, you might feel resentful because they require your help to be mobile on an ongoing basis. So why are anger and resentment so difficult to talk about? Well, that's really why we're here today. Everyone struggles to express feelings, but it can be even more challenging as a caregiver, as we know. And the process requires a lot of honesty, vulnerability, and a willingness to expose your greatest worries and fears. Anger and resentment are common emotions, but when they infiltrate personal relationships, it can feel like the world is crumbling. And I think this is so true for caregivers who, for example, use social media. And if you scroll through Facebook, you might find that it seems like the world around you is doing just fine while you're at home being a caregiver and struggling. And it would be normal then to feel more resentful, as an example. We're seeing this actually with younger caregivers who have been raised with technology. Resentment is a commonly reported emotion among millennial caregivers. If you look at Facebook, like I said, people don't share their struggles openly. People don't post, what a horrible day it's been. So it makes it seem like good people don't have bad problems. And we need to remember that negative emotions are also part of the human experience, but they are just that, an experience, and they don't define who we are. It's not the whole of our being. So instead of ignoring these emotions, it's really important that we acknowledge them and try to determine their underlying cause. Perhaps most importantly, to remember that there's nothing wrong with feeling angry. Emotions change all the time, and they don't define us as people.
You're so right about that. Each of us realizes, we know what happens to us when we all of a sudden feel angry. It's a physical impact, And so what we're trying to say is once you feel that, to prevent negative emotions from affecting your caregiving responsibilities, it's really important to determine their source. Here's a simple at-home exercise to help you get started. So let's look at that together, okay? Set a time for 15 minutes and sit down with a notebook, a pencil, or your computer. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and really explore the emotions you are experiencing. What's going on? Do you feel overworked and exhausted, unappreciated? Are you angry that you've lost time or independence? There are no right or wrong answers. Jot down anything that crosses your mind, no matter how silly or insignificant it seems. Once the time is up, review everything you've written, okay? Getting to the bottom of why you feel angry or resentful can help you not only cope with those feelings in the present, but also begin to make changes moving forward. I really have to say that it works. Many times I'll jot down, why am I so angry? And it does help. I know that people are wondering how they can minimize feelings of anger or resentment, but there's no quick fix for difficult carrying emotions. There are tips that we'll share later for dealing with conflict, which is different from the emotions we're discussing now. The job of caregiving is filled with highs and lows and changing. How you react takes, and adjust takes practice. Even so, there are several things you can do to make things easier. We've separated them into two categories: self-compassion and behavioral changes. So let's look at that. What is self-compassion? We talk a lot about this because it's so important. It's the practice of extending love and forgiveness to yourself when you feel inadequate or you're suffering. Specifically, it encourages to be mindful in the present moment versus over-identifying with negative feelings. Look at what you're grateful for, or reaching out to others who can support support you versus self isolation. It's important to start small. It's something that you need to start learning if you haven't done it already. So start small with one of these aspects of self-compassion, all right? It's important. Stop and look at yourself in the mirror. No judgment, no criticism. Just look at yourself. Self-love is very important for yourself. You have to learn to forgive yourself and not be so hard on yourself. Compassion doesn't end with oneself. It's important to be compassionate to those who are sick and remind ourselves that their actions, behaviors, and challenges we experience as a result of the illness, not the ill intentions of the person. That can help a lot in easing the anger and frustration that that we feel at times. Not an easy process to do, but I have to tell you, we keep saying that over and over again. Remember, it's the illness, not the person themselves. I believe that holding anger is very hurtful to ourselves. It's as if the anger is controlling our well-being and our happiness. So, at this time, I'm just wondering, can anyone in the audience relate to what I'm saying? Can you sort of share an experience that you've had with anger or any thoughts that you have on the subject? Let's open it up.
Okay, folks, if you're on the phone, press *6 and I have a little website. I can see that you've done that. And if you are using the chat room, now's a good time. We'd love to hear from you. Akeem, please.
Well, the only time I can really remember was repeating it to somebody that has Alzheimer's over and over again. And as I learned a little bit more about the sickness, I learned a lot more about caregiving, and that anger is not there anymore. So because I know what caused it.
What a perfect example to what I just said. Thank you so much for that.
And we have a chat, Lucy, from David. He says, journaling helps. My journal always listens.
I love that. I love that.
Very
I feel exactly the same way as you do. Sometimes when I read back, when I write down my emotions at that moment, yeah, they listen. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Maybe I could, if you don't mind, if I could add that I read it occasionally, An Open Heart by the Dalai Lama. And the great thing that he says about anger is, when you get angry, you're the only one who knows it. It takes your energy. The person you're angry at has no idea. They don't get it. So it's really about taking care of yourself. That's that self-compassion part, is you got to let it go. You got to figure out how to react in a positive way.
For sure. For sure. Thank you for that. Another way to view anger is to see your anger as information. Think about that. What is your anger trying to communicate to you? For instance, anger is a signal that our personal boundaries have been violated in some way. Maybe your anger tells you that someone has disrespected you and has spoken to you in a demeaning way. Your anger can then inspire you to talk to that person in a clear, kind manner and maintain your boundary. All right. Easier said than done, but let's say how we can actually do that. Anger can be very productive, believe it or not. To access productive anger, ask yourself these clarifying questions. Okay. Am I thinking facts based on my senses, or am I automatically believing biased, distorted, blaming, and judgmental thoughts? Next, what could be the skillful thing I could do next that would move things forward in a meaningful way? What does this situation call for when I look at things clearly? All right. So it's hard to express ourselves respectfully when we're angry. So here are some tips to turn your anger into effective communications. okay? Because you don't really want to escalate the situation. Talking back and forth doesn't do any good. So let's look at that. So here's a kind of a little test that you can do. Describe the facts that you've noticed. So it's for example, it's the I. I've noticed that you're talking to this person that you're kind of angry at. So this is the way of dealing with it. I've noticed that we each have something of value to say. However, every time I begin sharing something with you, you talk over me. Express your feelings or opinions. Being talked over makes me angry because I feel that I'm not heard and my opinions are not valued. Next, assert yourself. Express your feelings or opinions. Being talked over makes me feel angry. Assert what you need. I'd love to be able to share my thoughts without being interrupted or talked over. Reinforce how your request will benefit the other person. Because really what you want to do is you really want to make them listen to you, but not make them defensive. So you could say, it would make me feel close to you and value you if you heard me out, because I know that you value what I'm trying to say. So it's a way of not putting the person under defensive and not bickering back and forth. And if you want to remember this, to describe the facts you've noticed, express your feelings or opinions, assert what you need, reinforce how your request will benefit the other person, think of the word DEAR, D-E-A-R. D is for describe, E is express, A is assert, and R is reinforce. To acknowledge your feelings, you need to address them in a calm manner, as well as acknowledge the situation for what it is and try to let go of that anger. So it's really your tone, it's how you say it. Don't put people in a place where you're actually making them feel extremely judgmental.
These are all such excellent points. And I think one of the simplest things also that we can practice when we feel angry is to take a pause. It's the most helpful thing. And sometimes just saying, excuse me for a moment, I need to use the restroom, can be the best thing that you can do in a time of crisis or conflict, because perhaps both parties need a little time to simmer down and cool off. It can also be very helpful to take that time to just think about what is actually happening in a more rational or logical way. There are a lot of reasons why we can feel angry or agitated, and a lot of us don't really think of all of the reasons. Some of them could actually be physical. And this was something that certainly happened yesterday in my experience speaking with a local caregiver here in South Florida that I was in touch with through a local organization. And we speak from time to time, and she found herself especially frustrated, irritated, and agitated yesterday. And I asked her what was going on more holistically, and she had told me that the day prior she had had a colonoscopy. Oof. And it, of course, occurred to me that the sedatives that you're given and the anti-anxiety medications that you're given for the procedure, in addition to being dehydrated from the colonoscopy prep itself, can certainly make you feel a little bit off kilter. So there are a lot of medical reasons for why people experience anger, and yet we often don't really think about that. We know that this is true for many forms of dementia, like, for example, Alzheimer's or Lewy body dementia. As these diseases progress, sometimes people can lash out in frustration. And that can be especially tough for caregivers to deal with, anytime there's sudden bouts of anger. But anger is a common symptom. So again, it's important to take a step back and look for the immediate cause, whether it might be trouble communicating or physical discomfort of some kind. It's important, I think, that we're mindful too that there are other health issues and behavioral health issues that can cause anger and frustration both among care recipients and caregivers. For example, anti-anxiety medications and sleeping pills are prescribed for a wide variety of conditions nowadays, like panic disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, OCD. Doctors often use them to treat insomnia and sometimes also for physical conditions like neuropathy and things like this. And they can be very, very effective, but fits of anger are a rare but harmful side effect of some of these drugs, especially for people with already aggressive personalities. And for people who are withdrawing from anxiety medications, you especially can feel irritable, for example. Many people also live in chronic pain because of back issues, sports injuries, arthritis, the aging process. I know this to be true. Aches and pains come with getting older, and pain can be very hard to manage. It can make people feel irritable and short-tempered. I think this can also be truer, perhaps, for some men than for women. Men are often said not to deal with pain very well as compared to women. There is some research that shows support for that. But medications that can also be used to treat pain can cause changes to our affect and our mood, sometimes causing aggression. A lot of people don't know this, but statins, which are widely prescribed for cholesterol, to lower cholesterol, have been connected in some research studies to greater aggression and irritability. Experts say that low cholesterol also lowers levels of serotonin, your happiness hormone, which can lead to short temper and at times depression, which leads me, of course, to depression. Irritability often goes along with when we feel despair, which could be circumstantial or it could be something more longer term. Now, depressed men in particular are more likely to express more aggressive outbursts. It's described as anger turned inward, but it can also be turned outward. This is often treated, as we know, with medication and therapy, but sometimes these medications, especially as you're adjusting to them, have side effects. For example, they might interfere with your sleep. And if you're not sleeping very well, you can also be short-tempered. Some people don't really know or think about it, but diabetes, when you're told that you have a serious illness like diabetes, you're likely to have a lot of emotions. One of them can also be anger. People might resent having to change their lifestyle or feel that they are depriving themselves of things that they like to eat. They might also be scared about how their condition will affect their future. There is actually a link between lower than normal blood sugar and flying off the handle, which is interesting. This is because hormones that are used to control glucose levels are the same ones used to regulate stress. So, keeping our glucose levels in check can help to keep our mood regulated. Interesting. PMS and menopause also cause hormonal changes in the body. And I know a lot of men joke about it, but the agitation felt during a woman's time of the month is real. And there is a lot of research to support it. There are a lot of studies that show that levels of estrogen and progesterone fall the week before a woman's period, and this can in turn affect serotonin levels. The drop in hormones is also the reason for moodiness associated with menopause. And last but not least, thyroid. Hyperthyroidism is when the thyroid gland produces too much thyroid hormone. And this has a direct effect on a person's mood, linking the condition with a rise in tension and anxiety that can be treated with medication. So if you are feeling irritable or angry for a longer term than you feel is normal in your own experience of what normal is, it can be something that you should certainly speak to your doctor about. Getting routine checkups is important. Your doctor might also recommend that you seek counseling, perhaps, if that might be helpful for you and if you get a clean bill of health. But it's certainly important to look at all of these things holistically because we know that mind and body certainly work together. I was curious if anyone had any questions, and I did see some comments as well in the chat box. Gail shared, when I need to take a moment, I walk out to the mailbox. It gives me time to cool off and get a little exercise. I love that idea. And Gerald shared, I know my wife can sorry. I know my wife can longer reason, but I still get upset with her when she doesn't listen to me. How do I control my anger when I know the problem, but certain incidents trigger an outburst from me, and then I get upset with myself? If I'm not rested, sometimes this occurs more frequently. I think I know my problems, but can't seem to control my anger. I take statins for heart problems. Should I stop taking them? Definitely don't stop taking them. Speak with your doctor about what you're experiencing. Statins have a lot of side effects. And nowadays, doctors are recommending calcium screening be done, which is a simple test that you can get that actually looks at your legitimate risks from cholesterol, for example, as it links to heart disease. And so that is an important test that can potentially rule out your ability to need statins. So speak with your doctor about that test, but definitely don't make any changes to medications without consulting with the doctor, and speak with your doctor too about what you're experiencing. Because again, you might be due for a physical, or there might be some counseling or support groups that can be recommended near where you live that might be helpful for what you're experiencing as part of your caregiving journey. And I would invite Lucy or Evelyn to share some other tips as well.
Well, I think the fact that you're acknowledging what's going on with you and that you're recognizing the triggers, before, that's what I was talking about. We all have a physical reaction when we're angry. There is. Either your heart starts palpitating, your mouth becomes dry. So once you feel that, that's the time to take a 10 minutes break or take 10 big breaths, as one of the ladies says she goes to the mailbox. So the triggers tell you not to respond to that emotion at that moment, especially when you are caring for someone who doesn't have the understanding and probably will not change. You're going to have to learn to accept that. It's not easy, but all these steps that we're talking about, it's like reprogramming your brain. So again, when you feel those triggers, take some time out, take a breath. If you want to go have a cup of tea, coffee, whatever it takes, and then recognize when I said, remember that person's behavior, it's not because they want to behave that way. It's because of the illness. It's not easy. I know, I've been there. I've done that in my caregiving journey, but start practicing it.
We have oh, please go ahead, Evelyn.
Sorry. The other thing that Gerald might do is that many of the health plans have telehealth. And I understand that one of the things that is really effective in telehealth is anger management programs. And they're not long, it's maybe 6 weeks. And it really just talks to techniques, like Lucy was telling us, different techniques that you can use to kind of see the anger, feel the anger, think about how you're going to react to the anger, and then react. So you might want to try that, Gerald.
A great point, Evelyn. We were thinking along the same lines, and we have a comment actually about another technique that might be helpful from Lori. The 10-10-10 theory is helpful, though difficult to call to mind during moments of anger. How will I feel about this in 10 minutes, 10 weeks, 10 months? And that's one that I personally always try to think about too, is will this matter in 10 minutes or 10 weeks or 10 months? It can be helpful, but I do agree when you're feeling a fit of rage, it's very hard to think that way.
Thank you for that. That's really a good tip. Just very quickly, I was just so surprised by the statins, the idea that could trigger. So medications does play a big role. Yeah.
Statins do, absolutely. And also we've talked about this in other programs, but hydration. When our electrolytes are off, that can affect our mood, certainly. And we know with dementia, getting people to make sure that they're hydrated can be a challenge. So consuming foods like soups and things that are higher in moisture can be very helpful, even yogurt, for example.
Watermelon.
The best. Okay, so thank you for that. Those were really some great points that many people didn't consider. And as I said, I was surprised by the statins. So let's talk about resentments. One of the areas that many caregivers struggle is feeling like all the responsibilities on their shoulders. For example, it's rare that siblings will provide equal amounts of care to an ill parent. Usually, one person shoulders more of that responsibility. That can often result in a conflict and resentment. We received a question that is well suited for our program today in that regard. So I want to share that with you. My parents are in their late 80s and live on their own. My father has Alzheimer's and my mother is in pretty good shape for someone of her age. Though caring for my dad takes a toll on her. They don't drive, so ahead of the pandemic, my brother and I took them to appointments, took care of their groceries and prescription, took my mother to the hair salon, anything they needed. During the pandemic, my brother and his family relocated. Before then, we switched up responsibilities. And my brother would look after my dad while I took my mom out to get her some respite. I live alone and work full time, and this now leaves all of the responsibilities on my shoulder and no opportunity to provide my mom respite and be all things to all people. I've participated in your programs and used some of the tips you shared about using home delivery services for groceries, or even having an Uber pickup and take them to an appointment if I was working. I tried that, and it did relieve me of some stress and freed up some of my time. The problem is that my mother doesn't like having a stranger choose and deliver her groceries, and she doesn't like taking rides from a stranger. I try to explain again and again that I can be all things to all people, which resulted in us fighting. I feel resentful of my brother and upset to be in this situation. Well, I want to thank you for your question. I hear your anger and frustration. I'm glad that you're able to express them and recognize where they are coming from. I have to say that you will need to set limits with your mother and yourself. Otherwise, your anger and frustration will affect your health and your relationship with your parents. So let's look at a few things of how you can resolve some of that. If any of you are experiencing this kind of feeling of resentments, make a checklist of responsibilities or things that you do for your parents and seeing what is manageable. That's important. Communicate with your mother about what you can and cannot do and see if you can find some compromise. But stay firm about that. If you can accomplish it, you have to be able to say no. Contact your local AAAs, area agencies on aging. See if there is a senior rights service in your community so your mom has more potential for having a consistent driver that she can get to know better. There may be additional services in the community that can be of benefit. Can your parents, something you could discuss, afford a home help aid to provide your mom with some respite, possibly? Would your parents consider a senior living community that has transportation and meal service as an option? They might consider it. You could bring it up. Sometimes it can be helpful to have a social worker or a caseworker help to support you in dealing with this, with setting limits. I want to say that if you hold on to resentment, it's only going to escalate. And I know that personally for my caregiving journey, I had to set limits, not only for my mother, but I had to set limits for myself. As long as I knew that my mom was not at risk, I was able to do that. So I want to kind of open to the audience. For those participating today, have you handled any similar issues with members of your family or friends? And do you have some other tips that you would like to share with the audience?
We had a couple comments about changing statins or quitting statins because of some of the side effects that have been identified. ask your question again, Lucy. I just wanted to make sure people.
No, I'm just wondering if anybody in the audience, if you've had a similar situation where you felt resentment towards other family members that are not as involved, or even with the person that you're caring for, and setting limits with them and setting limits with yourself. It's not easy. As I said, I had to do that myself. And as long as I knew that I was never putting my mom at risk, I had sometimes to say no. Not easy, but I did it.
Press *6 if you're using your phone today. If you're zooming in, you can just unmute. And we've got a chat from Tina. It's so hard dealing with toxic family dynamics, poor communications, though unspoken, through unspoken expectations and manipulation to squeeze me with guilt when I try to set boundaries. Good. That's a great one.
Yeah, that is very, very, yes. It takes a lot of effort. And again, you have to kind of really deal with, because the first reaction is the anger. You're angry at them. Like, how dare you? How dare you do this to me? You know? And going back to some of the tools that we talked about is how can you express yourself in a way that you don't put these people on the defensive, that you try to allow them to see. Now, if you would like to stay at the end of the program, I would be more than happy, Elliot and I, to answer your question more in depth and a personal level.
And Tina, I would say, as a technique, one of the things that you can do is say, listen, you come over here, you take care of our care recipient for a week, and let me know, how you feel about setting boundaries.
I love that. I like that a lot. The thing that Tina mentioned was guilt. And I think guilt is tied very much to resentment. Because if you're being put through guilt trips or the experience of guilt, you're going to feel resentful about that. So certainly welcome more conversation about that after our formal presentation, but really good comments. So I'm mindful of our time. I am going to move forward. We have a little bit more in our presentation today. I wanted to talk about anger, and that anger really tends, in my opinion, to be one of the most undervalued and misunderstood of our emotions. But it has a very important task to signal when we feel threatened, when we feel in danger, when we need to protect ourselves or our loved ones. Anger is also a prime motivator. When we feel that enough is enough, we finally usually find ourselves propelled into action. And as we've actually been talking today, it's made me think about my own response to anger, because I'm very conflict avoidant. And when I feel really angry, the thing that I know to do is to put on my sneakers and to exercise. And if you think of that fight or flight, some of you might know what that is, but typically when we're threatened, we have one of two responses. And there is a third one now. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But it just made me connect as we've been talking about my response. And so the question is, for some of us, why do some of us experience and express more anger than others? For those of us who deal better with our anger than others, this is something we actually might have learned in childhood. And it's also something that scientists are now linking to our genes, interestingly enough, including emotions and anxiety. Think about how your parents dealt with anger. Think about how your culture or your religion regards anger. That's an important one too, and many of us don't think about that. But that's where that guilt that we were just referencing gets tied very much to resentment. And a lot of that actually is cultural or is tied to our religion in some way. Some cultures are considered, for example, more fiery or feisty than others. And in some cultures, peace is revered. So I think it's important for us to consider all that and take some time and think about where your position is in all of that. When I was growing up, my mother used to tell me that anger was one letter short of danger. And that was a cute little saying, but I don't think it was a very healthy way to look at anger. And when my mom would be angry, she would either write or she would bake. And that's, I think, why I heard about the journaling earlier, and that resonated with me. And so it's no wonder that early in life, I learned that for me, nothing could quite quell my feelings like food. And I think many of us turned to food actually to bring us comfort during the pandemic. That led to many of us feeling angry with ourselves then for letting ourselves go. I heard that time and time again, and we call it that. But in fact, we were doing the opposite. We were actually coping the best that we knew how at the time and keeping it all together. Now, as people, we're not always so good at giving ourselves credit for getting through tough times, and instead get angry with ourselves for how we could have done better. Now, we need to remember that a lot of what we know about coping, including anger, comes from what we saw growing up. We learn to cope by example, and it's an important lesson for us to understand that our emotions are modeled through behavior and our life experience. I've always seen caregiving, for example, as one of the most honorable duties that a person could fulfill and model to others as a way of fostering a more caring environment and community. But that was something, as I think about, that was instilled from a very young age. I don't even think I was double digits in age before I started doing volunteer work at a local senior center. And this was something that was encouraged in my upbringing. So a lot of how we deal with things, our perspectives, I think they're really something that we need to think about where we learned all of this. And what's really, really fascinating to me about some new research that was just published on caregiver anger is what I'm describing, something that I myself have experienced, I think. So the systematic review of the literature, which for those of you who don't know what that means, is that it's a study that looks at all of the studies before it on a specific topic. And it has a lot of statistical power and significance because it combines all of the results of everything that came before it on a specific topic. And what the findings were was that higher levels of anger and hostility exerted a negative effect on caregiver physical health. Higher anger control, meaning holding your anger in, was associated with increased weight gain. So this is kind of what I was describing before about pandemic weight gain, which may be attributed to stress, lack of control, and anger over the situation. But most of us were keeping it all together during the process. So it makes me think of that old saying, you are what you eat. I mean, rather, it's not what you eat, it's what's eating you. So, and it makes me actually think of our series for next month, which is called Our Health is Our Wealth. And it's a series that we have that's focused on the health of caregivers. So I thought the study was just very, very interesting because the study also found that higher expressed anger, so not held in, people that lash out, had higher blood glucose deregulation, which means that their blood sugar levels varied more. So caregivers who contained their anger gained weight. Those who expressed their anger had irregular blood sugar patterns. It's interesting that both outcomes link to insulin levels in the body. So I thought this was very interesting because this was the first study of its kind to measure evidence demonstrating the harmful effects of anger and hostility on caregivers' health and the need for preventative interventions to support family caregivers who are experiencing high levels of anger. So Lucy, if you had to leave our participants with some specific pieces of advice to help them dealing with anger, what would they be?
Well, here we go. Think before you speak. In the heat of the moment, it's easy to say something you'll later regret. Take a few moments to collect your thoughts before saying anything and allow others involved in the situation to do the same. I mean, that's really so important. Don't lash out. Take a step back. Once you're calm, express your anger. As soon as you're thinking clearly, express your frustration in an assertive but non-confrontational way. State your concerns and needs clearly and directly without hurting others or trying to control them. You know, don't put people on the defensive. It'll only aggravate the situation. Get some exercise, as Elliot says. I'm telling you, it works. Physical activities can help reduce stress that can cause you to become angry. If you feel your anger escalating, go for a brisk walk or spend some time doing other enjoyable physical activities. Take a time out. Time out aren't just for kids, everybody. Give yourself short breaks during times of the day that tend to be stressful. A few moments of quiet time might help you feel better, prepared to handle what's ahead without getting irritated or angry. Identify possible solutions. Instead of focusing on what made you mad, work on resolving the issue at hand, And, does your loved one keep repeating themselves? Don't get angry. Very much what the gentleman said. Remember, it's not their fault. It's the disease that's really making them behave in that certain way. Remind yourself that anger won't fix anything and might only make it worse. Now, stick with I statements. We talked about that to avoid criticizing or placing blame, which might only increase the tension. Use I statements to describe the problem. Be respectful and specific. For example, say, I'm upset that you left the table without offering to help with the dishes. Instead of, you never help. I'm not your servant. Don't hold a grudge. Forgiveness is a powerful tool. If you allow anger and other negative feelings to crowd out positive feelings, you might find yourself swallowed up by your own bitterness or sense of injustice. But if you can forgive someone who angered you, you might both learn from the situation and strengthen your relationship. So don't let anger control your happiness, because that's what it does. Many times it doesn't even affect the other person, as we were saying. Use humor to release tension. Lighten up, laugh at yourself. It can help tension. Use humor to help you face what's making you angry and possibly any unrealistic expectations you have from how things should go. I mean, you got to look at that. We have expectations that sometimes are not realistic. The person doesn't even realize that there are expectations. Avoid sarcasm, okay? It can hurt feelings and make things worse. Practice relaxation skills. When your temper flares, put relaxation skills to work. Practice deep breathing exercises. Those 10 breaths really do something. Imagine a relaxing scene or repeat a calming word or phrase such as, take it easy. Tell yourself that. You might also listen to music, write in a journal, or do a few yoga poses, whatever it takes to encourage relaxation. Know when to seek help. Now, this is really, really important. Learning to control anger is a challenge for everyone at times. Seek help from anger issues if your anger seems out of control. You can do things that you really need to find out. As Evelyn said, there is anger management courses that you can take that are very, very helpful. At the end of the day, go ahead.
Go ahead, Lucy. Sorry.
No. At the end of the day, it's almost as if reprogramming yourself. All the emotions, what we're talking about is that emotions affect you physically as well. We know that. It's in the literature. It's scientific. So if you've been doing something a certain way and it's not working for you, like if you're reacting to anger in a negative way, change that. But it's really something that you need to almost practice in order for it to be able to help you and the person that you are angry at.
We have a chat from Tina. I've also heard how when we are individuals who swallow our feelings, we tend to have eating disordered behaviors. Trying to keep peace in our environment creates a war within us. Communication is key.
I relate to that comment, Tina.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah.
Right.
And as
Elliot,
always, we have, oh, I'm sorry, Evelyn, please go ahead.
I was going to ask if we had just a minute. You know, in my practice, I had noticed that old traumas also bring up anger. And I don't know if there's any research on that or if you've had experience with that. Could talk
Yes,
about.
actually, I am doing research right now about what are known as ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and how they are conjuring up trauma right now in seniors, which has been very interesting. It's something that is becoming a little bit more talked about in the literature as more people, I think, have gone to seek mental health counseling since the pandemic. And so now we're just starting to see some literature come up about this. But of course, trauma in our life links to post-traumatic stress disorder. It links to anxiety, anger, hostility, conflict within us, conflict around us. And that's an excellent point that you brought up.
Okay.
So I was just going to share that, as always, we have some resources here. And we do have a link for those of you interested in participating in our session next week as we talk about uncertainty, our third in our 4-part series. The hyperlink is embedded within the slide, so you can click on that to be able to register for our program next week. And before I hand it over to you, Evelyn, I want to say that the one piece of advice that I learned about how to handle anger that was most effective, if I can communicate today, is that love is a much more powerful weapon than anger. And I've always tried to keep that in mind. I even have it written on a Post-it note inside of my closet, because we can all feel angry, but love truly is more powerful. And for those of you who want to talk a little bit more with us in an unrecorded, anonymous part of our session, after Evelyn provides her end of our program announcement, we will be taking just a 2-minute break so that we can use the restroom or grab some water if needed. And we will be joining back for 30 minutes. And I will be providing instructions as to how to make yourself anonymous in the Zoom meeting. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate your love comment. I have to tell you, one time it was when COVID ended the first time and we thought it was safe to go back out. I went to a bar to have a glass of wine. It was so fun. And this guy came and he wanted to sit in the chair right next to me. And he said, "Is it okay if I sit here?" I said, "Please don't sit there. You know, it's really too close." And he goes, "Oh, you know, why did you even come out of the house? Blah, blah, blah." Well, I bought his first beer when he moved somewhere else. And he came over and he said, "I'm really sorry." So love goes a long way.
It certainly does. And I'm sure that he will pass that on forward, I hope.
Yes. Okay, folks, I'm sorry, a little more housekeeping here. In a couple of days, you will get a post-session questionnaire. We really hope you take it seriously. We love your input and your feedback. Love to hear how you feel about the extra 30 minutes that Lucy and Elliot are providing. You're going to get any resources that we've discussed today. However, if you have not registered for today, if you got the link or phone number from someone else, you need to register. You won't get any of that. And the number to register is with the WellMed Charitable Foundation's customer service. And that's at 866-390-6491. 866-390-6491. And we really encourage you to fill out that questionnaire. I want to tell you about some of the stuff that we have coming up. It's a power pack month coming here. Not only do we have the rest of this series on the next 2 Wednesdays, how to handle uncertainty, how to process sadness with Elliot and Lucy. We also have tomorrow, dear Lucy is going to she's going to host an addiction expert, and they're going to talk about addiction and how you can cope with addiction. We also have one on March 13th, normal versus not normal aging. We have one On March 14th, behavioral disturbances in dementia. We have one on the 16th, suicide and aging. On the 21st, combating compassion fatigue with yourself and anyone else, a la Lucy. And on the 23rd, we have caregivers, time to say goodbye, how to eliminate toxic people from your life with Jamie Heisman. And on the 28th, understanding grief and loss. So as you can see, we have, as usual, just all these experts who are willing to come in and devote their time to really talking to us about very important topics for caregivers. With that, I really want to thank Lucy and Elliot. They always do so much work to prepare these things for us, and they're so well done, especially those. I'm really jealous of Elliot's slides, but he always does great ones. And I want to thank the WellMed Charitable Foundation for supporting this, for the Stress Busters program, for their SOS clinics, and also for, just being there to support caregivers in a very special way. And I would like to thank all of you participants, not just for being here today, but for giving us your input. We really appreciate that, and for what you do every day. And with that, yes.
No, I just wanted to say for those of you who are going to leave us, I just want to emphasize about tomorrow's for addiction. Whether you recognize it or not, caregivers are at risk for addiction for all the reasons that we talk about. So I hope that you do join me and the expert that we have on that series tomorrow. Thanks.
I have a question, I'm sorry. The resources that you spend, like for last week, I do the questionnaire, but I don't ever get resources. I've only gotten it one time.
Okay, I'll deal with that.
We'll make sure that you get them, Dorothy. Thank you for
I would
letting
like
us
to
know.
get last week's as well.
Of course.
Okay. All right. So at this point, I am going to say goodbye to you folks as the facilitator. Lucy and Elliot will be on the line in 2 minutes. Tomorrow, to register for tomorrow's session, we have for those of you who are on the phone, how will they get that information? Let's see, people who are on Zoom could see that chat.
I'm not getting it.
WellMedCharitableFoundation.org, caregiver support teleconnection events. Dear Lucy, we'll just send something out. We'll make sure something gets sent out with a link to that, okay? For Lucy's addiction thing tomorrow. And you can also call 866-390-6491. So goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much. Please don't leave if you want to be a part of the support group that's going to follow. And I hope you all have an excellent day, excellent week. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
All right.
so much.
I have a quick
Thank you,
question about the certificate for participation.
Yes, certainly.
How do we obtain this, our certificate for participating in the webinars?
So you can send an email to the foundation to let us know that you would like one. And if someone can provide the email address.
Okay, I'm ready.
Just bear with. I am waiting, hopefully, for someone from the foundation to provide that email address.
They can also call customer service.
Oh, there it is.
Caregiver SOS at wellmed.net. Again, that's caregiver SOS at wellmed.net, and ask for your certificate.
At WellMed.
WellMed, WELLMED like David, .net, N for Nancy, E for Elliot, T for Tom.
Okay, so caregiver SOS at wellmed.net.
You got it.
Okay,
Thank you so
everybody.
much. I
Thank you.
appreciate
I'm going to
that.
stop the recording now.